I am the vine, you are the branches. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. The roots of Messiah's history reach back to 1835, when the first missionary bishop of the Episcopal Church in the United States, the Reverend Jackson Kemper, was consecrated for the purpose of expanding the church into the Northwest. In 1850, Kemper sent the young missionary, James Lloyd Breck, to the newly formed territory of Minnesota. In the small settlement near Fort Snelling known as Pig's Eye, Breck initiated his work by establishing Christ Church. By the 1880s, St. Paul was well on its way to becoming a metropolitan rail center with rapidly growing commercial and financial industries. At this point, a group of concerned laity and clergy formed the Church Missionary Society of St. Paul for the express purpose of promoting the growth of the Episcopal Church within the city. In October 1889, this Church Missionary Society of St. Paul purchased an existing church building located on Dale and Portland for $200. A newly ordained graduate of Seabury Seminary in Faribault, Minnesota, named Charles Edgar Haupt, was selected as pastor for the new church. Later that same year, 2 lots were purchased on the corner of Fuller Avenue in Kent. A basement was dug, the existing building from Dale and Portland was moved, and the newly organized church and Sunday school were formally opened for services on January 19, 1890. 1 year and 4 months later, on May 7, 1891, the diocese officially gave the Church of the Messiah parish status. In 1896, C.E. Haupt helped establish what would become the Episcopal Church Home of Minnesota, which today is home to 140 elderly and disabled residents. The Reverend Haupt left Messiah in 1899 after being elected as General Missionary of the diocese. 2 years later, he was given the title of Archdeacon. He also went on to serve as the superintendent of Breck School, now located in Golden Valley, for 25 years. The Reverend Henry D. Jones of New York brought the church into the 20th century by serving as Messiah's rector from 1899 to 1903. The Reverend A. Overton Tarrant of Detroit served from 1903 to 1905. In 1904, during Tarrant's rectorship, the church received and dedicated a large Kasota stone memorial altar, which was deemed by the Pioneer Press to be the finest altar in the Twin Cities. In 1906, the Reverend L.R.S. Ferguson was called as rector to the Church of the Messiah and remained for 34 years. An outstanding individual, Father Ferguson served as senior chaplain during World War I, where he rose to the rank of colonel. He was also active in civic affairs, holding various posts as a St. Paul City Councilman, city clerk, and education commissioner over a 20-year period. Dramatic productions were a part of parish life at this time. Performances were held in a building next to the church.
It was called the Guild Hall. And there was more like a roll-up curtain like they have in the high schools and such. And they had a full stage. And in the back they had a lot of things for sound effects, for thunder and things for sound effects. And they had dressing rooms back there. And it was quite a deal. And they had quite a few sets they could set up to make it look like somebody's living room, or maybe a doctor's office, or whatever it might be. They could set up the scenery there. And it was quite professional.
During the early part of Ferguson's tenure, the Church of the Messiah continued to grow, as did the city of St. Paul. But by the 1920s, the city's expanding commercial district and changing demographics were having an impact on existing residential areas. Church attendance was dwindling as members, who were used to walking to church, moved further out, along with the expanding city. In 1930, the property on Fuller Avenue was sold to the Camphor African Methodist Episcopal Church, and the Church of the Messiah was moved to the corner of Juneau and Cretin, occupying a white-framed chapel purchased from the Plymouth Congregational Church. The building has since become a private residence. At the time that the church moved, attendance had fallen to an average of 30 people per Sunday. The country was just at the beginning of the Great Depression, and this small congregation was struggling to survive in a new area with few streets and very few houses. However, God provided strength through Arthur and Arabelle Goldsmith, who were already holding Episcopal Sunday school classes for neighborhood children on the second floor of a store at the corner of Palace and Cleveland. Mother Goldsmith, as she was known to her Sunday school children, and her husband Arthur soon incorporated their existing Sunday school into the church's ministry. They continued serving the parish in that capacity for many years. There were other key members of that small church who consistently took on whatever work needed to be done. The Depression, however, was taking its toll. Very few people moved into the area. While church membership grew slowly, bills accumulated quickly, and Father Ferguson was known to forego his salary. By 1940, finances had reached crisis proportions. At this point, Father Ferguson retired, and the newly ordained Reverend Robert Walterstorff, now the Right Reverend Walterstorff, retired Bishop of San Diego, was installed as rector of the parish.
I remember, too, on the third Sunday of my new ministry, I arrived at church and there was a for sale sign on the property. The church was delinquent in its mortgage payments, and because of that default, a sign had been placed on the property. At that time, 1940, the annual budget was under $2,000. And I received $1,000 as my salary. The building of this Church of the Messiah was a dream. I remember that many of my brother clergy used to say it was almost an impossible dream, because the congregation in 1940 was just struggling to exist. No one ever told me that my ministry was going to be easy. But I can assure you that the Lord did bless all that was done in His name.
I think he went to every house in Highland and asked if they had any children, whether they were Episcopalian or Presbyterian or Baptist or Jewish. Send them up to our Sunday school. And that's what we had, how the Sunday school really started to grow.
Evangelism and outreach were the keys of my success. Our worship was centered in the Eucharist. One of my great interests was young people.
Father Bob was very appealing. He was very enthusiastic and appealed to young people, particularly, I think all ages, but particularly young people, because he was so enthusiastic and so very supportive. And I know I personally just took to him immediately, as most of the kids in the Sunday school did. And probably he was one of the major reasons that I chose to go into the priesthood, his influence on my life.
During the long years of World War II, 33 parish members served in the armed services, 2 of whom gave up their lives.
My brother was killed, Louis Phillips, in 1944. In fact, the Christus Rex, which now stands over the altar at Messiah, is a memorial to Louis.
Over the years, Messiah has been blessed with extremely talented music directors. This blessing continued under Father Bob.
I also remember singing in the choir under the direction of Mr. Preston who was the organist and choir director for a number of years, an Englishman. And I think we did some rather ambitious things, like the Gounod Mass and some very ambitious things for a small group.
A church building fund was launched in January 1943 with $6.24. The plan was to build at the corner of Cleveland Avenue and Niles. However, in the meantime, 3 lots on the corner of Ford Road and McAllister were offered to Messiah by the diocese, with the provision that the new church be built on them. The offer was accepted, the first plan abandoned, and construction at the Fort Road site began. The new church was built in 2 phases. First, the basement was completed, and second, a superstructure was constructed over the finished basement.
The Lord seems to bless those who work together as a family to do His will. Because within 3 years, we had been able to pay off the mortgage for the basement units and move on and complete the superstructure as you see and use it today. There are other things as we look about the church. The figure of Christ and the 4 evangelists, they were part of the original pulpit. They are from the Anton Lang School of Carving in Oberammergau, Germany. They're truly beautiful gems, and you are most fortunate in heaven. The font for baptisms dates back to the church on Fuller Avenue. Oh, I look about too at these beautiful windows. They were designed by Peter Doman. He came to me one day shortly after came to the Twin City area. He saw the name Waltersdorf and sure he had a good buddy and companion. I knew not a word of German. But we became close friends. He designed these windows that were made in Cologne, Germany. And I remember when he finished the last window of St. Paul, I said earlier, I see one piece of glass missing. I was shocked when that little piece of glass was there. It had his name on it, Peter Doman. And I was upset. I see somebody else must have gotten upset. They took the piece of glass out. But I left it in because he said to me, this is my creation. You'll never see these windows anyplace but here. And he said, you wouldn't buy a good painting if the artist hadn't signed it. And I signed the last window of my creation of these windows in your name.
The Reverend Barry O'Leary followed Father Bob as rector in 1955 and stayed until 1969 when he became canon to the ordinary at the diocesan office.
Barry was just a young priest, and he didn't particularly care for anything like coffee hour, that type of thing. But he gave the most tremendous sermons. Oh, you couldn't believe how everybody enjoyed the sermons that he would give. Very, very studied, articulate. Oh, a tremendous guy.
In keeping with O'Leary's business management background, he oversaw the establishment of the Messiah Episcopal Church Endowment Fund in 1956. Today this fund, thanks to generous benefactors and prudent financial management, totals approximately $275,000. It was during O'Leary's tenure that the Seeger Room addition to the church was built. And in 1958, Dr. Georgiana Palmer donated to Messiah a 400-pound brass bell, which had formerly been used at Seabury Seminary in Faribault. During this time, 1955 to 1969, the Highland Park area was growing rapidly. An average of 275 people were attending Sunday services, and at one point, over 250 children were enrolled in Sunday school. The Reverend Hugh Turton served Messiah as rector from 1970 to 1977.
Father Turton was almost a complete change in the type of service. He was very, I suppose you could say, it high church type, regal. He looked like a king when he walked down the aisle with his long, beautiful white robe and white hair, and very, very impressive.
It was during Father Turton's rectorship that the Cursillo movement was introduced, providing powerful renewal experiences for parishioners. Extensive sanctuary and chancel remodeling took place in 1973. The altar was moved to the center so the celebrant could face the people, which in turn necessitated a remodeling of the backdrop and furnishings. It was during his tenure that a number of experimental liturgical changes were implemented.
Father Turton, he did have a lot of problems. The whole church was kind of in a turmoil then. The changes in the songbook, changes in the prayer book, and the activities that related to women priests, that all came up and came to a boil about the time that Father Turton was here. But he rode with the punches.
However, church attendance fell, dropping to less than 90 people per Sunday by 1975, with a much depleted Sunday school. Between the years of 1977 and 1981, Reverend Edwin Wittenberg served as Messiah's rector. Father Ed raised people's appreciation of the importance of the ministry of healing.
One of the first things that the congregation really did is to enhance its spiritual growth process is to ask the Order of St. Luke International to send a missionary to put on a healing mission in the parish. And as a result of that, the congregation at Church of the Messiah did have a healing service, and we conducted that every Tuesday.
During this time, the sanctuary chairs and kneelers were recovered with scripturally symbolic needlework.
My wife Diane was the chairman of a group of, I think, around 20 women of the church and a couple of men who worked on the needlework project, which is still in good shape, I understand, and still beautifying the main sanctuary of the church.
Worship music also underwent a change during Father Wittenberg's leadership.
There was a group of young adults, really, who wanted to introduce more contemporary music into the liturgy. And so Mike Walford and Tim Wittenberg and Mary Wittenberg and a good number of other young people of that age got together and they played guitars and other instruments and led the congregation in some of the more contemporary church music. Some of it came out of the renewal movement in Cursillo, and also did some of that music during the time the people were receiving communion. And so it was an introduction of more contemporary Christian music to the setting, along with the traditional hymns and the traditional liturgy.
The Reverend Wittenberg left Messiah to become head of pastoral care at United Hospitals in 1981. A search committee was formed to locate Messiah's next rector.
Our search committee was consisted of quite a number of the parishioners that we had invited everybody to participate. Bob Beard was the convener and led us to 6 or 7 priests to be interviewed. We asked each one of them to come, and we had a dinner meeting with each one of them. I had called Ernie in Africa and invited him to come. And of those that we interviewed, the only one that really stood out in a very, very pronounced fashion was Ernie. And so it was just as though it was destined to be. The Holy Spirit had led Ernie to us.
In January 1983, the Reverend Ernie Ashcroft arrived here from England via South Africa to become the 9th rector of the Church of the Messiah.
What I found when I came here was fundamentally it was a strong church. I think people who'd been as rectors before me I think, had built a strong church. It was strong not only financially, although it was strong financially, but it was strong in the sense that there was a real core of people who were very deeply committed to the Lord and to the church. And they simply wanted to go on to the next stage. And so it was a wonderful opportunity, in fact, for me to be able to do that with them. Quite early on, I embarked upon talking about a specific strategy with the vestry, and it involved the setting up of house groups.
Now, under the leadership of Messiah's associate priest, Irene Gifford, house groups offer an opportunity for significant growth in Christ.
In house groups, I think that people find family. They're able to interact as family. They're able to learn how to bear with one another's idiosyncrasies, how to care for one another, how to be accountable to one another in the use of their gifts and ministries. At Messiah, I believe that we're really called to be a family. And I think that house groups are, in that regard, very distinctive to who we are as a parish.
Other areas of emphasis under Ernie's rectorship include the Sunday sermon, which is seen as the primary teaching opportunity of the week. Children's ministry, including the Great Adventure Club, the youth program, catechesis of the Good Shepherd, Sunday school, and the nursery. Missions, where reaching out to places like Frogtown, Mexico, and Haiti are continuing to deepen our lives in Christ. And the arts, where the creative talents of Messiah members are given expression to the glory of God.
All the way along, I've wanted people to recognize that within the framework of the liturgy, within the use of the church year that we have, within the use, and we put sacraments very high up on our priorities here. No service, no Sunday service is anything other than a Eucharist. Within that, there's tremendous flexibility in worship and in communicating Christian truth. The purpose of worship is not to go through the motions. The purpose of worship is to bring us into the presence of God so that we might genuinely have the experience of being the community of God in the presence of God.
Throughout the last 100 years, it's taken the Lordship of Jesus Christ, along with the countless hours of dedicated work by women and men, to make Messiah what it is today.
Remember, the church is people and not some building. And what makes this parish a fellowship is that we are bound together by the leadership of Jesus Christ. And once you are infused with the Spirit of Jesus Christ, then watch out, because exciting things are then going to happen.